Great. Well, I'll get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for this webinar. This webinar is the fifth webinar that we've done with one of our presenters, Gracie, in honor of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So this is a reconciliation sharing circle that we'll be doing today. And my name is Katie, and I'll be facilitating the webinar for us. And I'm calling in from Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I'm just reflecting today as I walked and transited in on my commute into the office this morning, just seeing all the orange shirts on my way into the work today, and really looking at all the artwork on all the orange shirts, which I was specifically reflecting on today as our topic today is building respectful relationships with First Nations art. So really thinking about that today as I was looking at all the orange shirts. So I'm a research and evaluation analyst at Reichert and Associates, and we focus largely on healthcare transformation and doing a lot of work in healthcare. And we really support this work, working with this topic around working with and building respectful relationships with First Nations art, because it's important and because we work heavily in healthcare, and this work is super important for creating health equity in healthcare. So again, really excited for today's topic. So like I said, I work for Reichert and Associates, so we are facilitating today's webinar, and I'll pass it over to Gracie, who I've had the honor of working with over the last year in her work with and her role with Doctors of BC. So Gracie, I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
A swale, A is for good, swale is for day in our Halkomelem language. Hands up to Stephen with Reichert and Associates and the team, and also a shout out to Lisa for helping out with previous webinars. It's just been a really great journey to be with you to continue these learning and sharing opportunities. And so where I'm calling in from is humbly from my community of Thawali in Cultus Lake, Swilcha. Cultus Lake, we are one of the Chowiak tribe members. And I come here in a role of a cultural safety and humility facilitator. I'm also a cultural teacher of many special ideas and opportunities and gifts and learning and sharing of cultural teachings like Cedar. And so really enjoy doing that work. And, you know, one of my biggest advocates or responsibilities or commitments is to really ensure the connection to community. And my role now currently is a Indigenous relations liaison with our Indigenous specific anti-racism team here at Doctors of BC. So my goal and aim is always to proactively address issues of Indigenous specific anti-racism and how physicians deliver care and strengthen the provision of culturally safe care and improve this care and wellness and opportunity for growth and sharing and believing in the work that we're doing on behalf of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. So welcome, Peggy. Sure appreciate that you're able to join us in this wonderful teaching today.
Awesome. Aswal, Hadi, hello, bonjour. I wish to recognize I'm coming in from the traditional ancestral shared territories of the Scowlitz, Lacamal, Samath, Mathqui, and Kwantlen First Nations. I wish to self-locate, as what Dr. Maggie Kovac says, clarifies one's perspective on the world. So my English name is Peggy Janicki. My pronouns are she and her, and I am Dak Health, Tamasu from Nak-Asli Waten, and I was born and raised in Stalo territory. My mother is Mary O'Connell or Mary Sutherland or Mary McKinnon, and she was a large large participant in the Kokalitsa Weavers Guild and part of the Homemakers Association, like the Indian arts and crafts in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Kokalitsa. My Jeff Point of Skokale First Nation calls me daughter. So I'm a dipnet fisherwoman. I'm a war canoe puller. I'm a teacher. I'm the Indigenous mentor teacher here in Mission School District. I'm also the author of The Secret Pocket, or recently La Poche Secrète. And I've been teaching about Indian residential schools for about 24 years now. And lastly, I'm a daughter, sister, auntie, mother, grandmother. My granddaughter's in grade 10 this year. Just a little bit about myself. I also would like to raise my hands to the workers behind the scenes. So Yalswilf Kwasai, in many of our ceremonies, we thank the workers. So I would just want to thank all the people behind the scenes, the people that send the emails, that make a very safe digital space for ourselves. And I would like to also thank each and every one of you for being with us in this digital space. Life is busy, and so it's important to, when we share time, that we kind of put everything else aside. So I appreciate everyone doing that particular work. So Yalswis Kwasai. We'll go back to Katie.
Thanks, Gracie, and thanks, Peggy. Thanks so much for the introductions. And just before we get started into the content of today's presentation, I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items before we get started. So first off is we are recording today's webinar, and we are doing that so that we can share it with those who are unable to attend today, or for those who are taking special time for this learning tomorrow on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So we want to be able to share that. So just so you know, the recording is live and happening right now. And the recording, as well as all the webinar materials that are shared today, will be posted on the Reichert and Associates website for reference. So please feel free to visit that. That's where we'll post this, as well as perhaps some other on Gracie's website as well. I believe she said she would post that. Second item here is we just ask that you keep yourself on mute during today's presentation, just so that we aren't, there's no background noise that's being picked up, and we're not interrupting the speakers as they share their knowledge. But please use the chat box if you'd like to ask any questions or comment. Peggy has some great discussion questions that she'll be asking throughout her presentation, so please feel free to use the chat. And we'll be monitoring that as well. So please do that. And we will save some time for a discussion at the end of the session. So we'll do about an hour for the presentation, and the last half hour will be dedicated to questions and discussion. So please feel free to save your questions until then. And then we may not get through all questions today, but we will be doing a short survey after today's evaluation where we invite you to ask any other questions. And we'll also be doing that to gather any feedback about the webinar. And finally, we recognize that today and today's webinar may be difficult. It may be a difficult day tomorrow as well for those or for many people. And we will be sharing some free supports and resources at the end of the webinar and in the chat, so that if you want, you can visit, if you need support, you can visit these resources. And please also feel free to take breaks, put yourself on, you could take your video off, whatever you need to do during the webinar, just so that you're feeling comfortable and safe. And I think that's it for housekeeping items. I will pass it over to Gracie.
I've shared this before, and I still am just so humbled to have seen this. I walked into our community administration office and I was just in awe. We have always lived here by the same mountains, beneath the same skies. This is our community founder of our community of Thawali, John Wallace. And I keep saying and sharing that opportunity to just really be enlightened by these words, because it really demonstrates still equal set, we are still here. And I can remember, or I know of, exactly what spot this picture was taken. I didn't take this picture, but I know exactly where it is. So that even brings it more present every time. That gives me that humbling opportunity to just be really grateful for what has been prepared for me and my family, and my continued generations of my family that will continue to call this community of Thawali home. So when we talk about the words of traditional territory acknowledgement, we want to kind of get out of that recited script and offer that attention of how do you feel when you come by a beautiful river or a mountain or a stream or some beautiful flowers or a traditional plant. How does it make you feel? What is your gratitude when you've seen that? Whether it might be through the five senses or just that word from your heart of sharing that gratitude. So maybe, maybe from now on, consider the opportunity of changing your traditional territory acknowledgement every few months, just to have a change and reflection. Maybe it can be done through every season, of what you appreciate within each season, how beautiful this space is that has been created for us. And often as we continue to value the lands that have been prepared for us, what actions are we going to take to keep its beauty, to keep its wellness, its humbleness, that we can, and our future generations together can enjoy. So I just wanted to kind of ensure this message is shared, because it's important, and we want to get to that uniqueness, that centered approach as to how do we really belong in this community? How do we appreciate and ground ourselves in order to do the work of cultural safety and humility, in order to do the work of Indigenous specific anti-racism, and last but not least, in order to continue the learning journey that we all are responsible for, in creating awareness and our contribution to the 94 calls to action. So I just really come back to this picture or go back to this location and do my little offering of gratitude and thank you. And it's still like one of my favorite pictures and one of my favorite words that I come across. Now, we can go to the next slide. So this one's kind of cool, like came across this beautiful cedar tray. I think I was 9 years old when I created this tray, the little tray on the left. I learned, going to be alongside some beautiful matriarchs and elders and community members, and where we just grew and shared the community together. Through the seasons of the year, we developed that opportunity where we just really got to know each other by sharing food and sharing a teaching. And not one person knows everything. And all the resources within all the communities we would share. And respectfully through these teachings, these traditional story would come to mind. The gift of the mentors, the knowledge keepers and matriarchs would share their teachings with us. And so I learned how to create this at a very young age. And that's probably one of the beginnings of why I am here today and doing my work of cultural teachings, is based on that original connection and creation of our own little family within a family within a family. And I just really appreciated at that time and just really enjoyed the love and friendship and connection that we all had together. I learned that it's okay to make mistakes. I learned to not ask too many questions all at once. And I learned that every time I visit, I'm going to learn something new. And I learned to continue to ensure to not give up and leave a project half completed, that it was my responsibility when I started from the beginning, that that was my intention to do. And I continued to learn to practice with humility along the way. And that's a pretty great teaching for that young age of 9. So graduating into the other picture of 2 cedar hats there. So it's been a journey of wonder, amazement, celebration, appreciation of the red and yellow cedar bark, of the gifts, how we harvest the cedar, of the teachings of how to not only create the cedar hats, but everything else that have been bestowed upon us as a traditional teaching. I, put my hands up to all those who have been on my lifelong learning journey to get from my cedar tray to my cedar hats. And I wouldn't be here today without them. And, it's this traditional teaching to always honor. Cedar is our second greatest resource, and the Stalo, the river, is our first greatest resource. So I just thought it'd be kind of fulfilling for me to share a little bit of my journey to where I was to where I am now. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a great segue into the work that Peggy's going to be sharing. I wrote this play. It's called It's Not Just a Rock. And I wanted to honor Jill Levine for using her unique talents and connecting with Canva and creating this image for me. The story is centered around my community of Sewali, and the beautiful nature and wildlife that we all exist together. Yes, sometimes it's a bit scary coming across some bears, but I'm able to handle myself in a more manageable way, I guess I could say. But going back to the connection, as we all just have to live and learn and share this lands together. And I appreciate the images, but it's also that reflection of we didn't know where these images came from. So it's just honoring the connection to how the images could still help create the story that I wanted to create. And without having that connection to the story, there's really not much else to it. So I think it's just a really great way to recognize that the work has to begin from a traditional teaching and acknowledgement and honoring of people who have put their hard work into creating the images, creating the story, creating the value of what they wanted to share it for. So I feel that that's part of our lesson in growing and learning in today's work, but also in future work when we want to plan or create some more awareness with First Nations art. What do we do? Where do we begin? How do we do it in a respectful manner by ensuring we are being respectful in this space that we're living together in. So thanks for kind of letting me share some introductory work and sharing my perspective, and I'll hand it over to our wonderful Peggy that's here today.
Awesome. So just going to just the title today is our call 92, Building Respectful Relationships with First Nations Arts. Next slide. And we've all done our land acknowledgements. I do like to share this picture because I had shared it on social media, and so one of the responses was, "You should add the Halkomelem place names to those names." And so the black is the English, or and some with a question mark, and the yellow is the Halkomelem that I had to research. So it does take a little bit of time, but it is very very worthwhile. Next slide. I had introduced myself, so I like showing so I am a visual learner. So I just sharing, I'm a canoe puller, I'm a fisher, which means I fish off of cliffs in the Fraser Valley. I'm an author of a children's book, weaver, union leader, and teacher. Next slide. A key piece about this presentation today is I really wanted to make sure that we had a Creative Commons license under it. So you are free to share and to adapt under the following terms, that you give the appropriate credit to the authors, not to use for commercial purposes. And if you transform the material, that you distribute your contribution under the same license as the original. I love this Creative Commons license. It's like, here it goes out and people can know about it. Just a note about accessibility. The document, I tried to make sure there's color contrast using general rules, a larger font size. Images have alternate text. The links are embedded and described, and animations are limited. Text decorations like capitals, bolding, italics, and underline is avoided. And as what was noted, is this webinar will be recorded and we'll have accompanying resources. So, and we might have a natural stretch break because about 1:45. Awesome. Next slide. And just a content warning or a trigger warning is because we will be sharing about First Nations art, Indigenous brilliance, but it often intersects with Indigenous specific racism, or stereotyping, or some of the things that can happen. So I'm just sharing, folks can take a break from their screen if it gets a little bit too overwhelming. But of course, please listen to yourself if you start feeling overwhelmed. If you feel overwhelmed, it's important you respect your own needs and to be kind and to be kind to yourself. Awesome. Next slide. Now, we were wondering, the inner cedar bark rose in the picture is, we're going to ask everybody here if you can put it maybe into the chat, is is this cedar bark rose, is it art or craft or both? But if you can put it into the chat box to start our dialogue, that would be great. I think both. Ooh, both. Both? Both with a question mark. Art, both. Ooh. Art, both. Awesome. I like the, is it both? I like the both question mark and then both exclamation mark. Great in the chat. Regardless, it's gorgeous. That's true. So I had to put in there Cedar Roses by BC teacher Rick Joe, who is my husband. But Gracie, if you want to open your microphone and sort of share what you see when you look at this inner cedar bark rose.
To begin with, it's really honoring our second greatest resource and taking that time and consideration to offer that prayer of gratitude and for its resilience to be able to grow through its hundreds of years, to be on the shores and help protect us and give us story, give us teaching, give us tradition, And I share this often. And this is it's a prayer written by Siebert Allen School in October 2003. So the classmates all were asked, what are you grateful for the cedar, what it has to offer? So I'll just share the prayer. Yahu Kwasai Kwalam La Te Slukwith Set. Thank you for providing us with canoes. Kwalam Te Kwalmux Kwala Stelmuk Set. Thank you for the roots and medicine. Kwalam Te Hape Thakwalt Set. Thank you for creating baskets. Kwalam Te Hapela. Thank you for providing shelter. Aquastock to Set. Thank you for giving us clothing. So without this offering to our ancestors, to those before us who have gifted us this special teaching, we wouldn't be here today. So it's my responsibility as a cedar creator to ensure that I follow protocol in sharing this work. And, you know, to honor the work of it being art or craft, I often share it as a traditional teaching, just to throw in a little bit more of these words. So just really a great honor to have learned this. I was at a gathering in Siebert Island, and I learned how to make the roses, and it was made with 2 strips of the inner cedar bark, the sluey, we call it. And I came home and I was so excited to show my mama, and I showed her how I did it, and then she threw my rose across the table, and that little breath of mine's going like, what's going on? And she goes, I'll teach you how to make it better. And so that work of doing it with 1 strip of cedar, I learned from my mom, and it's just so, it's so humbling, and I'm feeling very blessed to share these words that a little bit of mom and I go in each of the cedar roses. Not to say that the first way I did it was wrong. It was just another way to do the work of the cedar teaching. So I'm pretty blessed to be able to continue this journey of sharing and continuing to learn some more teachings from others within their communities or regions on how they value the natural resources that are around us. Thanks, Peggy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gracie. I love talking to artists. When I ask them, well, what do you see? It's like, so listening to you, I can hear there's so much more than just art versus craft. So we'll just start with art versus craft. So next slide, please. So very often, it's usually the power dynamics around how the definitions work. So this is a very, I am an artist and have taken fine arts and art history with my B.Ed. And my understanding is that art versus craft, it has to do with a power dynamic for the definitions. So it's usually, and I always wondered this because often we would go to maybe a touristy land, you know, and visit, and often people say, oh, this is a wonderful craft. And it's like, okay, well, is it a craft when they've been carving for 2 days, you know, and just happen to have it while, you know, while you are being a tourist looking for something to purchase. So often it has, this power dynamic has colonial roots. It often dismisses Indigenous knowledge. 3, it's hierarchical. 4, it's cultural pride. I guess I should have versus disrespectful. 5, the loss of authority. And 6, and this is what I hear when Gracie was talking, is the sovereignty piece. Sovereign laws, sovereign knowledges, sovereign generations to pass down this knowledges. So I'm just reading from the text below. So many Indigenous authors and artists discuss how the Western art versus craft discussion is a colonial framework that diminishes Indigenous creations by classifying them as craft rather than art. And it ignores their deep significance. Carmen Robertson argues that these Eurocentric categories suppress Indigenous work and disconnect it from its rich traditions. Instead of art and craft, they propose concepts like relational making, emphasizing the spiritual and community-based knowledge embedded in the creation process. Awesome. Next slide. Now, we're going into some of the topics that when we were thinking of the arts, so as a teacher, I've been in the education setting for since 2001, and then before that as well, but been in schools and different properties. And very often this is sort of the question, and in classrooms too, is this idea of Indigenous art. So there is a large piece that I teach around Salish weaving is the idea of appropriation. So there's this idea of respect versus appropriation. So SFU has this amazing PDF work booklet, and it's called Think Before You Appropriate, and it's a guide for creators and designers. I first came across this document when it was the fashion industry has been taken to task because it appropriated an Inuit beautiful tunic, and it had two white handprints on the front, painted on the front of a tunic that they were saying was theirs as recent artists, but really found out that they had taken the design from Inuit communities. And so the conversation in this particular document, and I quite like it because it talks about things about, it does a case study throughout the PDF. And I put a content warning with this document just to be cautious for in the classroom, because on page 16, it includes the term squaw fashion. So that is not an appropriate term to be used at certain age levels, but it is a wonderful document to talk about appropriation versus respect. So highly recommended. One of the examples is company is wanting to use a logo on the side of their van, and so do they. The original case study is they had just taken something off of the internet and put it up on the van. And so the question is, well, that company has missed a really beautiful opportunity to work with local Indigenous artists to create a logo for their van and for their company. So really great document and highly recommend. Next. This one is sort of the next level of appropriation, and this is the new wave of artificial intelligence, and the caution of the violence of erasure. So AI systems can misrepresent or distort Indigenous families, cultures, practices, and lands because the training data is inaccurate, and they this particular document I created based on the 5 R's of Indigenous research framework. But what I find is, and I'll just use an example, is when you're generating the AI images, it will very likely not create the proper images. And then how are you to know if you don't know that you don't know? And so it's kind of a spiral kind of or echo effect of the stock footage challenge, which I'll talk about in a few minutes here. But if you're using AI, I would really caution using it with Indigenous art. There is Dr. Susan Dion, an Indigenous scholar, highly recommend her work. But she talks about this idea that Indigenous people are the perfect stranger. And so, and she talks as an educator on how do we interrupt this perfect stranger positioning, but how it leads back to AI and art is if you don't know, if you're a stranger to Indigenous art, then how are you to know through AI if this is Indigenous art? And so I would really caution against this, because we also run into a challenge with erasure. So if you bypass our families and communities trying to, find a really quick poster, for your event or for your company, then you kind of bypass, you've erased Indigenous community. And we're a very vital, moving, living, thriving community. And so you would have missed interrupting the perfect stranger. I was trying to create, a group of people were trying to create a poster for Salish weaving, with a cedar tree, and the AI came up with something that did not look like me. So I'm a weaver in training. And I was like, that doesn't look like me at all. And I won't be sitting like that. And then the cedar tree that it made, it look like maybe like a banyan tree, like from Florida or something. It was very, very strange. So I would just really caution using the AI, because there's lots of challenges. So it doesn't respect Indigenous knowledges. Indigenous knowledge challenge dominant Western epistemologies that often inform AI systems. Reciprocity, so there won't be a reciprocal relationship if you use AI. Responsibility to challenge colonial narratives in tech. So critically examine how AI can perpetuate colonial systems is a responsibility. And relationships. Again, AI cannot follow Indigenous protocols and truly know the nuances of them. So what Gracie was talking about, when we go to the cedar tree, to have those relationships with generations, those are important, very important relationship pieces that AI is not capable of ensuring. So huge caution on the use of AI. Okay, next slide. Some nations, not all nations, but many nations like Stalo Nation, they have a heritage policy. And this is the case study. The key case for this was the Journey Home project, which involved the repatriation and analysis of Stalo ancestral remains. And it highlights the community's efforts to manage their heritage, establish permitting processes, and collaboration with institutions. So that's the work of this policy. And how it's implemented is it's meant to be a living document that evolves and adapts over time in response to changing needs and contexts, which I think would be very vital for Stalo artists. And for folks that are dealing, that have a relationship with Stalo artists. And what I like is it's community. It's approved by the Stalo Nation, Lalem to Stalo Siam, May 5th, 2003. So very much around this document is they're saying that this is our art, like this is our culture, and very much part of this art, creating art in your space. It's like, oh, it's attached to a heritage policy. I didn't know, right? So many nations have come at this from different aspects. So Stalo Nation absolutely has. Okay, next slide. This one I quite love. So Stalo, the ha is the sacred. And this verse is worth discussing, because as a teacher, what I find is many educators are like, well, I'm not sure what to do, and I'm afraid of doing or sharing something I shouldn't be. And so on the Scowlitz digital website, I highly recommend for many things. But what I appreciate is they've added the labels, the traditional knowledge labels. And this sort of just says, hey, these are sacred practices or belongings or photography. And this is sort of like hands off. like we don't want to deal with this, or this is like not really what we want for a public space. So it's very much around things, and you may have heard around protocols and practices around photography, for instance. Very important here in Stalo territory, as it just asks folks to be cognizant of photography of loved ones. And I've seen this for I want to say the Indigenous people in Australia. Often they'll have in their trigger warning you may see images of somebody who has passed away. And you'll see that more in Australia than I think here. But there are protocols and practices. And of course, this is with generations in mind. So this policy is looking after what we call in Stalo territory, Tamiach, and it means generations. So looking after our ancestors, looking after new people that have passed away, that it's what do you call it, living, like it's part of the community, right? So if you have photography, I had to take a photograph down of somebody who had passed away until the family had given permission for it to go back up. Awesome. Next slide. And we're just coming up to the 1:45 mark, so I may have to switch screens. So might be for a second there, but I also just want to introduce when I was in union leadership, and my longest Zoom meeting was 12 hours. And so we're just coming up to our halfway mark. So I'll just introduce you. You just take your thumbs and you point them behind you. Yeah. It kind of helps stretch you out just a little bit. So just to remind ourselves to move our bodies around a little bit. And just so you know, I may have to switch screens at 1:45. Why? I don't know. The technical world. So I apologize if I glitch out. So the next piece is talking about stories and art. So stories and art can change and shape the legal landscape. Stories and art have great power. And the picture that I have here is the Salish weaving that I did in one of our schools here in Mission. And it was around the SOGI 123 curriculum. And we honored a teacher here in the Fraser Valley, Salish Wesley of Scoquel First Nation. And what we're talking about is art. There's a large responsibility upon artists and weavers and storytellers. And we're trying to
I think that's Peggy
Hi there.
switching. There we go.
All right. As Gracie, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Peggy.
Let's see. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Oh, there's a bit of an echo, Peggy. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me on this screen then. Is that correct? Okay. Awesome. Okay. As planned, that was our stretch break. So stories and art, and sort of how we are trying to negotiate our world has great power. So next slide. And this is a really great, this is a wonderful book. And it's titled, So You Want to Talk About Race. But the quote is, but what actually is not fair is the expectation that a dominant culture can just take and enjoy and profit from the beauty and art and creation of an oppressed culture without taking on any of the pain and oppression people of that culture had to survive while creating it. So this is a really wonderful book about race, but also moving our conversation, recognizing that Indigenous people, that we are in our oppression, and talking about racism or upholding white supremacy, challenging biases. All of these are kind of rolled um, into um, into the challenges of art. All right, next slide, please. Story and art is, from my perspective as a storyteller, that we are trying to make our lives better as well. And what I mean by that is, and I'll just read this quote, I quite love it, again by Maggie Kovat. Indigenous scholar Marie Batiste suggests that one of the most critical aspects of Indigenous research is the ethical responsibility to ensure that Indigenous knowledges and people are not exploited. Research is about collective responsibility. We can only go so far before we see a face. Our elder cleaning fish, our sister living on the edge in East Vancouver, and hear a voice whispering, "Are you helping us?" And I feel this is one of the things that we as artists are trying to carry forward as storytellers and as artists. We're trying to, how is this, there's a larger, and many artists talk about this responsibility of sharing our worldview. Awesome. Next slide, please. So sacred responsibility, I wanted to just take a moment. So this is Dr. Nicola Campbell quote from her dissertation. To witness, remember, and recount is a sacred responsibility within the practice of imparting Indigenous stories, because stories are alive and the voices and knowledge of our ancestors is embodied within them. So as artists and storytellers, we're trying to be fulfill our responsibility. And what I have pictured here is the cover of my children's book. And this was a book created, and it's a story from my mother's perspective of her experience at Indian residential school. And so when this story first came out, we were visiting her at the Abbotsford Hospital, the rehabilitation hospital. She had broken her hip. So my brother and I went to go visit. And so when the story came out, because it was somebody was taking the food tray out of the room, and my mom was like, "Hey, grab that napkin," and I was like, "Mom, it's a napkin. I don't know," but I knew as soon as I touched it that it was a very special napkin. It was the one that feels like fabric. And I was like, "Oh, that's a good napkin." And I had given it to her. And then I said something to my brother just across the way. And then I looked back and the napkin was gone. And I was like, "Mom, where did the napkin go?" Um, and I looked at my brother, and my brother said, "Oh, that's Mom and her LeJack ways." And that's the name of the residential school my mom went to. And I was like, "Oh, well, what's that about?"
Good day, Gracie Learning Center. Pleasant reminder that
I'm in a
tomorrow,
classroom.
Tuesday.
That was our announcements in the classroom. I am in a school. So the story came very impromptu, but it carried the gave me the responsibility of carrying the story. And so each time I would tell it, it would be, Mom, can I tell this when I'm teaching about Indian residential school? And her answer was yes. She was, yes, people have to know. And then the second time, when the University of the Fraser Valley wanted the story for the Indigenous graduates, I had asked her permission again. It was, Mom, can we tell this story? And again, she was like, yes, people have to know. And the third time was when this opportunity for the book came, but the challenge was my mom had passed away. And so how do you get consent, after someone has gone? And so there was a few ideas, but I had consulted with my cousin who was chief at the time and came up with the idea that the author contract, that 90% of my author contract goes back to the Nakaesli Elder Society. And so once I was able to get them on the contract, I was able to write this book to fulfill my responsibility to the story, recognizing that it was a very sacred story. All right, next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about contracts and ownership. So the contracts are really important between yourself and the artists. And it just lays everything out. So it's, thinking about clarifying copyright, ownerships, rights and permissions. It's essential for ethical art partnership. And I just want to also add, and it's not on here, is to consider how to look after the art piece. And I'm thinking specifically of carvings, how you want, if it has inner cedar bark features on it, or if it's a house post, that there are instructions on what to do or what not to do. So next slide. The artists and artist attribution, it's important to put who the artist is. One, of course, it respect and recognitions. It honors artists' creativity, skill, labor. Two, cultural integrity ensures the art is not separated from the cultural context or misrepresented. Three, it combats appropriation. It makes it clear that the work is not generic or quote like native design, but by a specific person, family, or nation. It's a professional and legal protection. It discourages plagiarism and unauthorized reproductions. 5, there's educational value. When people know who created the work, then they can connect to the story and the nation, because then it would be, oh, I've heard of this artist. Why did, I recognize that name, right? So it builds your relationship to the art as well. 6, the legacy and continuity. It ensures the artist's work are remembered and valued in the long term. Awesome, next slide. Oh, this one, the stolen images. So stolen images are often in stock footage. So stock footage has risks on using images. This was an image I retrieved from Canva Images when I did a simple search of Indigenous person in the search bar. So who are these people? We don't know. What are their names? We still don't know that either. So, and who took this picture? We don't know who took this picture. So I'll just tell a story. I know of an Indigenous author, and in the children's book, it was stock footage. So you'll often see that in the back of the book around images and copyright. Sorry, there's a couple very famous stock footage companies. It's slipping my mind right now. But I had looked at her book, and it was a beautiful children's book. And then at the back, like the second last page or third last page, it was like, we went to go visit my uncle. Yeah, I stock. Yeah, thank you. It was, they had, this is my uncle. And I asked the author, I was like, is this actually your uncle? Because this doesn't look like your uncle. And they're like, no, I have no idea who that is. Because the company, the publisher, preferred to use stock footage for photography. And so I would just really caution around stock footage. And again, the stock footage that's what often will feed the AI machine, right? The large language models are combing through, and in many instances, stealing through images to generate new images. So stock footage, I would really, there's a really wonderful artist, and he has written a book, something about the midnight sun. And he is trying to reclaim old photographs by adding names to those photographs. I'll have to think about who that is. Right, next slide. So the here in Mission School District, we have a belongings project that we have just begun. We're going into our second year. And it came from a place of often in educational spaces, large, money is spent on artwork, trying to create a beautiful, welcoming space. But over time, sometimes the information is missing next to the artwork. And so we have a few pieces around the district that is like that. And we wanted to sort of create a place, a digital space. And so staff and community, we have a beautiful house post, and our hope is like to have belongings project and to have a QR code next to it. And so you can find, with using your smartphone or device, that you can find information. And we'll also have the artist information that you would often see. It's a certain name to a card. When you go to an art gallery or a museum, it'll say what the materials are made of, who the artist is, those things. So many of the pieces, I find across many school districts is that that information is missing. And so we were wanting to curate our own pieces. Now, one of the challenges we had here in the district is in the process is a piece was purchased, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's in our outdoor space. It's a wooden panel. But upon reflection and researching, we realize that it's very likely that it's an appropriated piece. And so had gone back to the organization that was selling this piece. And it was really a really interesting conversation because they weren't understanding the idea of appropriation. And so it was, did you make this piece? And the answer is yes, I made this piece. It's like, did you, like they didn't understand that they had appropriated. But they had taken the image, put it on the wooden panel. But their understanding, even, today, is I made that piece. Like I took that image from online and I worked with that wooden panel, and I did this, the detail and the carving to that art panel. And they considered that artwork to be theirs. And so how do adults, like, how do we have these conversations? Like when you're a legitimate, adult who's trying to buy or, purchase artwork for your space, when you're looking at a piece, what are some of the questions that can dig a little bit further? And so we created these 10 questions. Actually, there was more questions, but it was, the first question is, who is the original artist of this piece, right? 2, did you design this artwork yourself, or is it based on someone else's design? 3, do you have permission from the original artist or the estate to use the design? And 4, is this a one-of-a-kind piece, or have multiple versions been made, which clarifies whether it's unique, original, or a reproduction? 5, can you provide any documentation or provenance for this artwork? So that means that's where you're going into the certificates, the receipts, or gallery records of this piece, because often, folks that are not curating in art galleries, often you'll see them in this kind of, I don't know what kind of, they're some of the places are art places, but also tourist-centered stores. And so we get this interesting combination of where you will find Indigenous art. And so it's important to sort of dig down to who this original artist is. Awesome. Next slide, please. So we're just coming to the end of my portion of the slides, but I just wanted to overall just say that, and just alluding to the 5 R's of Indigenous research, you may have heard me say it earlier. So this is an Indigenous research framework, and involves respect, reciprocity, relevance, responsibility, and relational. And this is, the 5 R's is actually much of whenever I create a project, whether it's small or a larger teacher inquiry project, like the project of Heart Canoe that we had here in Mission School District, whether it's a really big project or if it's a really small project, I use these 5 R's. And I feel the art, working with First Nations or Indigenous artists, that we all are having many research projects when we're having these pieces, because they are attached to a culture and community. So next slide, please. There. So Yalswas Kwasai, I just want to raise my hands and thank you for working with me and my electric technology challenges. And I'm glad it all worked out, but I think we're moving into, Kenny will move into the Q&A section.
Great. Thank you so much, Peggy. Yeah, what a wonderful presentation and discussion that both you and Gracie shared. Really appreciate all the examples that you shared, and a couple things that came up for me are just how much more there is to art, right? It's also about all the stories, the relationships, the lessons, the teachings that are behind it, and how important it is to really engage in those relationships with the artists and art to reveal that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I'll open the floor up for questions. And if you have a question, please feel free to add it to the chat. If you have either a question for Gracie or Peggy, please feel free to add it to the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask away. So maybe I'll just give a couple seconds here to see if there's any questions. Just looking in the chat. Well, I have a question just to get us started. I think you shared some really great examples and resources. So for example, like the 5 R's. But I'm wondering if there's any other examples or efforts that you can highlight that have been made to try to decolonize the way that Indigenous art has been either shared or distributed, or how Indigenous artists are engaged with. So actually, I remember last year, Gracie, from the webinar, you shared about an art walk, an example of that. So I'm just kind of thinking about different ways that maybe there's other examples of a decolonized approach to engaging with art and artists. So I'll pass it over to the two of you.
Gracie, you want to start about the the walk?
Just considering the opportunity to really learn from various artists in their work, whether it might be through photo images or even some of their gifts of sharing. You know, I think it's honorable to create some kind of learning and teaching. Of course, I acknowledge the wonderful art centers that exist within our kind of urban cities, but really getting to know a little bit more on a less structured way, in a way where we could really appreciate the surroundings around us, which gives them the motivation, one of the motivations to help come up with their ideas or do the work. But I feel that opportunity can still be captured, and I think of, you know, the connection to story with language as well. So incorporating that. So there's ideas surrounding that kind of work and how we could become more consistent in sharing the learning with each other besides June 21st and September 30th, right? So, yeah.
I think that's great. I think just to extend what Gracie's talking about is what I often talk about as well, is it's not just September 30th and it's not just June 21st. You know, we're looking towards lifelong learning or understanding. And one of them, if of course, is through the language. Highly recommend decolonizing. I always call it, when I'm teaching the language, those LH sounds, the voiceless lateral fricative, is what they're called. But I always talk about decolonizing our mouths. It's like, you know, learning the language can make a big difference. But I also turning our attention to a really beautiful research or a book called Research is Ceremony. And so I just want to talk about the feeling I have around decolonizing, meaning you're going to feel the difference when you're talking about things that are decolonizing. And so what the author, Dr. Alford, I believe, in his research book, it's just a small, well, what I would consider a smaller book, but he does his research and then does a letter to his sons, I think every other chapter. And I just remember as a piece of academic writing that this was just such a beautiful example of indigenizing or decolonizing. You know, writing feels like you feel the difference. It's more organic, or it's more rhizomes, rhizomatically grown. It's very different. Awesome. So I'm just looking in the chat here. Thank you, Gracie and Peggy. Just wondering if you can speak to the value, if any, for Indigenous folks of having Indigenous art in public spaces, for example, in a school or healthcare space that is intended for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Representation matters. Representation matters. And this is for our space. This is, to me, very valuable, along with the land acknowledgement, to recognize the land, our relationship to the land, and the communities that we all are a part of by being there. So I think representation really matters, and it's there's such an array of expression of Indigenous artists that it won't be what's the word? It won't be like, it won't be redundant. You know, if you have every single piece by a different Indigenous artist, the expressions of our brilliance is just staggering and beautiful and so different from one another, that I don't feel that it would be that it would ever be redundant. There's just such a wide variety of expression. So I'm also looking at Gracie, do you have is there any place you know about to find Indigenous artists to support?
I think about that opportunity of when we connect with First Nations artists and, in order to do the contract, the importance of permission and continued discussion and reflection and the time to not just say, can you do this contract and complete all of the following and make amendments to the contract and give us a date of when the artwork will be finished and we'll pick it up or something. Instead, it's that respectful dialogue and support throughout the whole process and throughout that time and space of when that artwork is created, just that open, continued discussion of that learning will continue of how important that artwork will be for whatever it may take place in, whether it's in a building or a photo or on the wall or so there's so much to consider, and it's just really important to always have that consistent approach, that it's not going to be a 1 or 2 or 3 time short meeting connection. It's really meeting with the artists at their level when they have that time to really kind of appeal to what it is that's been asked, and then they continue with that heart and heart work and make that creation within their own time. So there's just some ideas in regards to that. I feel there's a lot of great networking that has taken place within a lot of cultural centers within our education systems that we have, our schools, and so there's lots of connections there, as well as even getting to know a little bit more about the friendship centers and the people who visit and learning about what's around us within those areas.
Wonderful. Just going to the question by Joshua. Can you share your thoughts on companies that are sharing Indigenous art? The one that seems to be ever present is Native Northwest in stores on BC ferries. Seemingly the artists are being credited, including some that know but interested in my perspective. So I often look at these pieces. So we're talking about the art that we see at BC ferries or in some of the tourism places. And I think one of the challenges I do have is when an artist, sorry, I've forgotten the artist name, but it was around the art piece, the Sasquatch image. And the artist had shared on social media, this is my art and this is the stolen art, and put the two images together. And it was, yes, Francis Horn Sr., thank you. And it was, I think, a really important conversation because we have to be very savvy consumers of art. And to do a bit of homework. And so my favorite go-to is making sure that the artists are cited, of course, but also have a bit of money guaranteed, to that piece. And so I'm thinking, to my mind, that is, Gracie, help me. I think it's the 7th generation blanket store in Seattle. Is that the name of it? But they will have artists be part of creating a design for the blankets that they're going to use or sell in their store. And the artists get citation, but they also get a certain amount of money from that copyright. And I think that's an important piece to the artists. So it's complicated, but 8th generation, that's it. Thank you. It's complicated, but like everything else, the closer you look, the more complicated it becomes. But I'm calling on you that it's a very well worth journey to know that you have a piece of art that is relationship making and beautiful, right? So you get so much more when you've done your research and are aware of some of the challenges that happened. Sorry, I'm not seeing any more questions, or maybe I'm scrolling the wrong way.
Really, to be considerate to always look for that signature.
Yes.
Yeah, and do your homework that they are First Nations, Métis or Inuit, you know, so that's to honor their work. And yeah, if we don't continue to uphold these protocols and teachings, then the stolen work will continue. So we need to uphold our artists and all the work that they've done so their artwork is not stolen. There are stores who sell work that is not theirs. So
Yes.
it does exist around us. It does exist in locally. It does exist within our regions. I'm sad to say that, but that's the reality of it. And it's up to us as a consumer, the supporter, to ensure we're asking questions in those stores and we need to see those answers. We need to see respectful engagement and connection to uphold these Indigenous artists.
There's a question. What are my thoughts on non-Indigenous individuals who have Indigenous tattoos that are done or given by Indigenous peoples? That's, I haven't really thought about that recently. So what are you asking? Your thoughts on non-Indigenous individuals who have Indigenous tattoos? Well, I usually, we have really wonderful artists that came visiting from Hawaii. So they're Hawaiian, Native American, and they had traveled to BC, and they have these, you know, they're doing their style of tattoos onto our family. So I know my husband has one, a tattoo, but my husband's not Hawaiian. He's Litwa, you know, he's First Nations. But my understanding with the artist was it was a long conversation between the tattoo artists and that design, and how they came upon that design for my husband. So I think the challenge I have is the Northwest Coast designs that can be appropriated and put on people that, you know, are not connected, I think is the challenge. It's always about, to me, it's always like, you know, making sure the artist knows, the consumer knows, and, you know, where did this art piece come from? Are we being connected to that artist? So there is, you might see it, it's sort of Northwest Coast-ish design. There's no signature or anything. It's a fish kind of bent in kind of a half circle. And you might see it in different places, but it's like, well, if you were to have that piece tattooed, there's no connection to the artist. There's no connection to the community. And it's that, to me, would be problematic, because we do have people that are stealing, actively stealing stories and art. And it's, you know, we need to try to value or what I call displace that sort of interaction. We're trying to build relationships with communities and to empower our families, especially some of the young artists. Just brilliant, brilliant work. And my mind is, you know, fixed on the brilliance of our families, and kind of wondering, well, how come not everybody knows the brilliance of our communities? So that's the hope that I have for consumers, whether you're a small business, larger spaces, larger budgets. My hope is that you have authentic art, and to quote my husband, is reconciliation is found on budget lines.
I can share as well, my opportunity to create the cultural considerations in the Mama Iathalut, the urgent primary care center in Chilliwack, and I was able to do a call out for proposal, and we opened it up to the public, and we did have some wonderful, beautiful representation of First Nations art throughout the building. And it was just being really considerate to hear within all the artists that were around locally what it is that the community meant to them. And knowing that it was going to go in a health center, that really brought the pieces all together. So we had little bits of sharing and gifts of the surroundings, whether it might be the nature with the photographs with Fred Meyerink or Bonnie Graham's images of the salmon and the bear, and some of the work from Freddie Jackson, and the work in the different rooms, including the language. It really brought it all together, and it was honorable to see that connection to the Chilliwack region within itself. So it wouldn't have been appropriate to just have people from Chilliwack, because the area represents the Fraser Valley. So that's always something to consider when we do the work, not just center it on somebody who's convenient and able to do a really good job, who you may have known of. Do your research and make those connections. And we have this end result, which people can visit and check out, because it's worth the time to go visit and see how beautiful this artwork can be in many different forms.
I think the last question is for you, Gracie, so maybe I'll read it. Gracie, you mentioned, so this has been a wonderful presentation. I appreciate the invite. Gracie, you mentioned something about your weaving at the beginning of the webinar that I believe should have more emphasis. You mentioned your basket was a piece of you. When artists are creating these pieces and bringing their vision to life, they're truly leaving a piece of themselves. You just want to add a comment to that, Gracie?
Wow, this is pretty. It's,
Yeah.
and thinking, I always say thinking, I don't know why I do. The connection to the families and communities who have taught people, whether it might be the matriarchs, the special women leaders within our families, or learning how to gather the roots or the bark or the whatever it may be in order to make it. It very much, each time I look at that tray, I even can visualize all the women who are around me and who they were and what they were. They were just so proud that I was there to learn at such a young age. So that's that part of memory. That's that part of connection to really valuing and appreciating what a cedar root piece is, and cedar bark itself. So I think it's just really that story of it all came together with that end product. And what's amazing that I could still look at it and still have that reflection right there in front of me, which is pretty amazing. So it wasn't until, so I made it at 9. So it wasn't until over the last year that it resurfaced. And I seen just the edge of it, and then I knew that it was something I did. And I know it's been how many years, and I still know that I did that. So there we go. That's that piece of me, and pretty grateful that it's still in one piece.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Gracie, and thank you, Peggy. Just seeing, I don't see. Oh, I see one more question here from Catherine. I'm curious if Gracie can share about the artwork featured in your background today.
This is with Doctors of BC, and we have this special gift from one of the artists, and he was able to offer this image for us. And so we're able to commemorate his artwork And over the past couple of weeks, we were able to add it to our work. Focuses on the work of healing and support, taking action, and continuing on our journey together. So the connection to our ancestors and healing.
Great. It's a beautiful piece of art, and yeah, it goes really well with the topic for today. So we just are in the last few minutes here, so maybe I'll just wrap up and just close out the webinar. So I just want to again extend so much gratitude to you, Peggy, and to you, Gracie, for sharing your reflections and your expertise on this very important and very interesting topic. And I definitely learned a great deal from today, and I'm sure some of the viewers did too. I saw in the chat lots of gratitude. So thank you so much for that. I'll just kind of finish up today with, again, just sharing that these are some resources that Peggy referenced to throughout the presentation today. We did put some of them in the chat as we were going along, but the resources will be available on our website along with the webinar recording. So we will be sharing that and will be up on our website. Maybe give us a couple days to get that all up. So again, if you haven't been to our website before, we do have a page under webinars where you will be able to find this year's webinar as well as previous years and any resources as well. And again, thank you all for being here today and participating. And these are some additional support resources if, again, any hard times or any feelings come up for you over the next couple days. As we remember the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, these are just some resources that we will share. I believe it's being shared in the chat right now, but will be on our website as well, so you can refer to those if you need additional support. And finally, these are some resources that Peggy has provided that help inform her presentation today. So thank you, everybody, for participating, and we really appreciate it, and we hope to see you soon. We will be sending out a survey at some point to gather some feedback. So thanks again, everybody. And Gracie and Peggy, maybe I'll just pass it over to you one last time.
All right. So yeah, thank you to everyone who is able to be with us today. I appreciate it.
Keep the learning going. I sure appreciate this opportunity and look forward to seeing everybody again. Have a great day.